There is a moment, and maybe you know exactly which one I'm talking about, where you are sitting in complete silence. Maybe it's late. Maybe the house is still. Maybe you're just staring at your phone or watching the ceiling do absolutely nothing. And out of nowhere, with no warning and no explanation, you think of him. Not because something reminded you, not because a song came on, just him, his face, the way he used to look at you, the version of you that existed when he was close. And then, almost in the same breath, you wonder, does he ever do this? Does he ever just feel me? That question, that quiet, almost embarrassing question that you would never say out loud to most people. That is exactly where we are going tonight, because Carl Jung, one of the most profound psychologists who ever lived, spent his entire life studying why human beings feel each other in ways that have nothing to do with proximity, nothing to do with words, and sometimes nothing to do with logic at all. And what he discovered will not just answer that question, it will change the way you understand every relationship you have ever had, including the ones that ended without an ending, the ones that still live somewhere inside you, and the one you might be in right now, wondering why he goes quiet but never fully disappears. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you is not a theory you will read once and forget. It is a mirror, and once you see yourself in it, you cannot unsee it. Jung believed and built an entire architecture of the human mind around this belief that the conscious self, the part of us that makes grocery lists and sends emails and rehearses what to say before difficult conversations, is only a small fraction of who we actually are. Beneath it lives something ancient, something vast, something that does not speak in sentences. It speaks in feelings, in pulls, in that inexplicable sense that someone is thinking of you before they even reach out, in that electricity that arrives in a room before a person does. Jung called this the unconscious, and he spent decades proving that it is not a passive storage unit. It is alive, it is active, it is always moving. Now here is where it gets intimate. Here is where this stops being a psychology lecture and starts being about you specifically. Every woman carries what Jung would call a psychic field. Not psychic in the mystical sense, though there is mystery here, but psychic in the truest meaning of the word, of the psyche, of the soul, of the deep interior self. This field is not something you manufacture. It is not something you post about or perform. It is the accumulation of everything you have survived, everything you have loved, every boundary you have quietly held, every moment you chose yourself when every impulse told you to shrink, every scar that healed into something wiser, and every part of you that remained tender anyway. That is your field. That is your energy. And whether you know it or not, that field radiates outward. It enters rooms, it lingers in memories, it lives in the bodies of people who have been close enough to feel it. And here is the part that should stop you cold. It continues to move in them long after you have physically left. Think about the last person who truly affected you, not just attracted you, affected you, the one who changed the temperature of your mood when they walked into a room, the one whose silence was somehow louder than other people's words, the one you could not quite categorize or contain, the one who made you feel simultaneously safe and terrified, known and unsettled, drawn in and desperate to protect yourself. Do you remember that feeling? That is not chemistry in the shallow sense. That is not simply physical attraction or well-timed flirting. What you were experiencing was a psychic encounter. Two fields meeting, two unconscious worlds recognizing something in each other before the rational mind could intervene with its endless list of reasons why this might not be a good idea. Jung had a name for this moment of recognition. He called it constellation, when two psyches come into proximity and something dormant in each of them is suddenly, irresistibly activated. It is why you can meet 100 people at a party and feel almost nothing. And then, one person enters, says 3 sentences, maybe not even particularly brilliant sentences, and something ancient in you sits up straight and says, "This one. It is not your imagination. It is not desperation. It is your unconscious responding to a signal your conscious mind has not yet decoded." But here is what the algorithm doesn't tell you. Here is what most relationship advice completely misses. That same force, that same invisible field, works in the people who have been close to you too. And it does not switch off just because they walked away or went quiet or convinced themselves they were over it or moved on. The unconscious does not receive that memo. The unconscious does not respond to pride or ego or the decision to stop texting someone back. The unconscious follows its own time, its own logic, and its own need for completion. And when something is unresolved, when two fields have met and something between them was never fully expressed, never fully understood, never fully healed, the unconscious keeps returning to it, like a tongue returning to a sore tooth, like a dream that replays itself slightly differently each night, looking for its own meaning. This is why he still thinks about you. Not because you are doing something, not because you are strategically creating distance or posting the right things or waiting the perfect amount of time, because you are real, because something in your energy, in your actual interior life, in your wounds and your warmth and your willingness to feel things fully, activated something in him that he does not fully understand. And what we do not fully understand, we cannot stop reaching for. Let me tell you about something Jung called projection. And I want you to hold this carefully because it will unlock something you have likely been confused about for a very long time. Projection is when we unconsciously place parts of ourselves, parts we have disowned, buried, suppressed, or not yet met, onto another person. We see in them something that actually belongs to us. It is not a flaw. It is not weakness. It is simply how the unconscious operates before it becomes more conscious. And projection happens constantly in love. Constantly. The man who looks at you and sees a kind of freedom he has never allowed himself, he will be pulled to you in a way that frightens him. The man who looks at you and sees warmth, the kind of warmth that was withheld from him in childhood or in past relationships, he will feel things in your presence that he cannot name and cannot control. The man who looks at you and sees emotional honesty, the kind he has always been too defended to offer anyone, he will be both magnetized and quietly panicked by you. He will circle you. He will come close and then retreat. He will say less than he feels. He will watch you from a distance while pretending he is not watching. And none of this is a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of his unmet interior. You became a mirror for something he has not yet been brave enough to face in himself. And mirrors, as beautiful and necessary as they are also deeply uncomfortable. You cannot be angry at someone for flinching away from their own reflection. But you can stop reading his confusion as a verdict on your value, because that is the trap, isn't it? When someone who feels everything you suspect he feels still doesn't fully show up, when someone who clearly thinks about you goes silent, when someone who cannot stay away from you also cannot fully commit. We turn inward. We ask, what is wrong with me? Why am I not enough? Why does it feel like the connection is real, but the follow-through is phantom? And that question, that agonizing question, is where so many women lose themselves, not because they are weak, but because they are doing what women are trained to do, looking inward when the answer is actually outside themselves, in the psychology of a man who is still running from his own depth. Jung would say, do not shrink yourself to fit inside someone else's unresolved psychology. Your energy is not a problem to be managed. Your depth is not a wound to be explained. Your emotional intelligence is not a burden that makes love harder. These are the very things that made you unforgettable. These are the exact qualities that entered his unconscious and set up a residence there without asking permission. Now, I want to talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough, and it requires you to sit with it for a moment. There is a concept in Jungian psychology called the anima. Every man carries within his unconscious an inner feminine figure, a living psychological image of the feminine that is shaped by his earliest experiences of women, his mother, his first love, the women who showed him what love could feel like, and the women who showed him what its absence felt like. This anima is not a fantasy. It is not an ideal. It is a living force in his inner world that searches for itself in the women he encounters in real life. When a man meets a woman who resonates with his anima, when your particular way of being in the world rhymes with something deep and unspoken in his inner feminine, the recognition that happens is almost seismic. He will feel it before he understands it. He will feel drawn before he has reasons. He will remember you in a way that confounds him. And here is the part that is both beautiful and a little heartbreaking to accept. He may feel you every single day and still be too unconscious, too defended, too emotionally undeveloped to bring that feeling into the light. Feeling is not the same as choosing. Recognition is not the same as readiness. The unconscious can be completely alive to your presence, while the conscious ego is still building walls, still running old programs, still operating from wounds that have not been named or healed. You cannot reach into someone's unconscious and wake it up for them. That is not love. That is labor. And there is a difference between being someone's catalyst and being someone's caretaker. You were meant to be the former, never the latter. So where does that leave you? Here. It leaves you here, in the most powerful position you may not fully realize you occupy. Your energy, the authentic, layered, deeply felt energy of a woman who has chosen to know herself, is one of the most profound forces in any room you enter. Not because it is loud, not because it demands anything, but because it is real in a world that is drowning in performance. Because it is grounded in a culture that rewards reaction. Because it carries the specific frequency of a person who has been through something and came out not harder, but truer. Jung spent decades studying what he called individuation, the lifelong process of becoming more fully yourself. Not the self that was shaped by your parents' fears or your culture's expectations or your old relationships' damage, but the self that exists beneath all of that. The self that knows, the self that recognizes, the self that feels and chooses and moves through the world with the quiet authority of someone who has done the inner work. And he believed, he knew, that a woman who is even partially individuated, even partially awake to her own interior landscape, carries a presence that is genuinely difficult to forget. Because most people are still asleep. Most people are still managing impressions rather than living from truth. Most people are still building personalities designed to protect the parts of themselves they are most afraid to show. And when someone like you, someone who has chosen feeling over numbness, depth over ease, self-knowledge over comfortable illusion, walks into a room or into a life, it registers in the body, in the nervous system, in the unconscious, in the part of a person that has always known more than they let on. And let me go somewhere even deeper now, because I think you are ready for this. The reason someone feels your energy every day is not only because you are exceptional, though you may be, it is also because they are unfinished, because there is an open loop between you and them that their unconscious has not yet been able to close. Jung understood that the psyche is always seeking resolution, always seeking integration, always trying to bring what is unconscious into consciousness, always trying to complete what was started. When something between two people is left unspoken, when there was a truth that never got said, a feeling that was never fully expressed, a moment of real connection that was never honored, the unconscious carries it forward. It does not close the file. It keeps the loop open. It returns to it in quiet moments, in dreams, in that strange, hollow feeling that arrives without an obvious cause. You know that feeling, the one that sits in your chest on an ordinary Tuesday, the one that has no name but has a face. That is an open loop. That is the unconscious still holding something it never got to put down. And the person who feels your energy every day is experiencing their version of that too. They are carrying an open loop. You are living in it, not because you asked to, not because you are doing anything to maintain it, but because what happened between you, whatever it was, however it ended or didn't end, left something unresolved in them. And the unconscious does not respect timelines. It does not care how much time has passed. It does not care how many other people they have dated since. The loop stays open until it is consciously examined, until the feeling is named, until the truth is finally faced. That truth might be that they love you and are afraid of what that means. It might be that they hurt you and carry more guilt than they show. It might be that you represented a version of life they chose not to live, and they wonder, quietly, in the dark, what that life would have felt like. It might be that you saw them, truly saw them, in a way that no one before you did, and that kind of being seen is not something the psyche forgets easily. It is not something the ego can simply delete when it becomes inconvenient. Being truly seen by another person is one of the deepest human experiences there is, and if you have ever offered that to someone, if you have ever looked at a person and understood them in a way they had never been understood before, you live in them, not metaphorically, psychologically. You became part of their inner world. You became a reference point for what real feels like. And real, once experienced, is nearly impossible to stop reaching for. I want to say something now that I need you to hear, not just in your mind, but somewhere a little lower, somewhere in the body, somewhere closer to where you actually carry things. You have spent so much time wondering if you matter to the people who have passed through your life. You have analyzed messages and silences and half-commitments and moments of warmth, followed by inexplicable distance. You have done what emotionally intelligent women do. You have tried to understand, because understanding feels safer than simply feeling, and feeling the full weight of it all sometimes seems like more than one heart should have to hold. You have questioned yourself. You have wondered if your love was too much, if your expectations were too high, if your presence was somehow both magnetic and impossible to sustain proximity to. And here is what I want you to know, what Jung would want you to know. What everything we have been building toward in this conversation points directly to: it was never too much. You were never too much. The depth of what you carry, the intensity of your feeling, the acuity of your perception, the refusal to settle for surface when every part of you craves something real, that was not a flaw. That was your frequency. That was the signal. And some people are not yet tuned to receive a signal that truthful. Some people encounter your depth and feel the distance between where they are and where they would need to be to truly meet you there. And rather than rise toward that distance, they retreat from it. Not because you failed, but because the gap between who they are and who they would need to become in order to love you well is one they are not ready to cross. That is not a rejection of you. That is an evasion of themselves. And still, and here is the part that is both the wound and the gift, they feel you. Every day they feel you. In the specific silence that follows them into rooms, in the comparisons they make without meaning to, in the moments of real connection with other people that somehow still fall short of what they felt with you. They feel your energy because your energy told them the truth about what is possible. And you cannot unfeel a truth like that. You cannot unknow it. It lives in you whether you want it to or not. Jung believed that the goal of the human life is not comfort. It is not approval. It is not the performance of a self that other people find manageable. The goal, the telos, the deep purpose, is wholeness, becoming more fully, more honestly, more completely yourself. And part of that journey is learning to stop measuring your value by whether the people you love are brave enough to stay. Because some people are passing through your life not to stay in it, but to be changed by it, to be cracked open a little, to go home carrying something they did not have before, a question they cannot stop asking, a standard they cannot stop reaching for, a feeling they filed under her, that they will spend years trying to recreate with someone else. You were never background. You were never footnote. You were never almost enough. You were the experience by which everything else gets measured, and that is not a consolation prize. That is the quiet, devastating, beautiful truth of what it means to move through the world with your kind of energy. So let it breathe. Let it exist without apology. Let it stop trying to make itself smaller so that people who are still half asleep feel more comfortable in its presence. Because the right person, the person who has done enough of their own inner work, who has sat with enough of their own shadow to recognize yours without running, that person will not be threatened by your depth. They will be answered by it. They will feel your energy, and instead of pulling back, they will lean in. They will feel your energy every day, not as a haunting, but as a homecoming. And that is the love Jung was pointing toward all along. Not the love that diminishes you, not the love that keeps you guessing, not the love that needs you to be less so it can feel like more, but the love that meets you in your wholeness, your full, complicated, luminous, shadow-carrying, scar-bearing, truth-telling wholeness, and says, yes, this, here, you, until that love arrives, and it will, because you are someone who has learned to feel things fully, and fully feeling people do not settle for echoes of the real thing. Until then, tend your energy, protect it, nourish it. Do not spend it trying to convince people of your worth. Do not drain it, chasing people who only come close enough to feel you, but never close enough to truly see you. Do not let the ache of almost love persuade you to become someone smaller and quieter and easier to hold. Your energy is not the problem. It is the answer. And somewhere right now, in a quiet moment, in a distracted thought, in a dream they will try to shake off in the morning, someone is feeling it. They don't know exactly why. They can't fully explain it, but something in them, something old and honest and awake, knows exactly who it belongs to. It belongs to you. It has always belonged to you.